And I'm not at all suggesting that every firm can do this. I think it's going to go through the same evolution as we did with hourly billing to value pricing to subscription. I think you're going to have that 2.5% of firms, those firms that listen to Accounting High, early adopt and do this first. And they start talking about it. They put that offering out there. The consumers flock to it because it's a better, superior offering, more in line with what they're really buying, which is the transformation, not the service, not the tax return. And I think over time, you're either on this bus or on this train or under it, because this is an economic era we're moving into. It's bigger than a business model. It doesn't care about your feelings. This is already here. It's only going to grow.
Welcome to Accounting High.
Introducing the star of our show,
Principal Ron Baker.
We're gonna have a problem here.
Oh, students, you're in for a treat today because I'm in the principal's office.
As usual.
As usual, back in the principal's office today. This is going to be a transformational episode today. Today, we've got the king of transformations here himself, Mr. Principal Ron Baker. Thanks for joining us again at Accounting High, Ron.
Thanks for having me, Scott. I was looking at that opening. You need to cut in the Ferris Bueller clip from the economics class when all the kids are just like zoned out listening to the economics teacher, which is Ben Stein, who is a real life economist, by the way, just up there droning on about something really boring.
In 1930, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives, in an effort to alleviate the effects of the, anyone? The Great Depression, passed the, anyone? A tariff bill, the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act, which, anyone, raised or lowered? Raised tariffs in an effort to collect more revenue for the federal government. Did it work? Anyone? Anyone know the effects? It did not work, and the United States sank deeper into the Great Depression.
Yep. Ron, this is probably like your sixth time on the show. Students, you have heard Ron on here plenty of times. He is the principal at Accounting High. Let's just kind of start us off here talking about what brought you back to Accounting High. What are we going to be discussing today?
Well, I gave you a choice of two topics, but I like this one better, although the other one is really interesting, and we should talk about it on
put a pin in
another
the
episode.
Other one.
Yeah, sounds good. But my two favorite questions to ask about actually any industry, but certainly accounting firms. And those are, what would happen if Disney started accounting firms? That's a great question.
I love that one.
Because it would make you think about the customer experience. It would make you think about the pricing. Would they be cheaper? Would they commoditize it? Would they upscale it, charge a premium? And my second favorite question is around the business model. What would you monetize if you gave the services away for free? Because
what would you monetize if you gave all the compliance away for
everything?
Free?
Advisory, CAS, tax, audit, everything. The services are no longer where the value is. Just a thought experiment.
And who do you ask these questions to? Yourself?
Everyone. And I think we are at a significant point in our economy where we're transitioning from one economic era to another. And I'm not just talking about the industrial economy 3.0, 4.0. That's a crappy moniker. If you think about the economic eras that we've been through since we've been roaming the earth for about roughly 300,000 years, we were certainly a hunter-gatherer society for a while, for most of it. Then we moved into an agricultural economy. And these economic eras that we're describing are described by the output they generate. So the agricultural economy was wheat and corn and maize and all the things that we grew, right? And then, of course, we moved into the Industrial Revolution, which was a mass-produced product era, right? The Model T, appliances, all of those types of things. In the 1920s, we started to see the service sector emerge. Usually people date the service economy in the 80s, but it's been around a lot longer than that. It's been around since the 20s, when economists started to notice that a big group of the labor pool were working in areas that didn't manufacture anything. They were working in banks. No, that wasn't until the 50s.
Okay.
Service workers would be like people in insurance companies, claim adjusters, waiters and waitresses in restaurants, bank tellers, things like that. Think customer airline counter service people, those types of service jobs that we think of. So that was the service economy. Notice again that we're naming these eras based upon their output, products, services. In the 1980s and 90s, probably more in the 90s, we started to see the experience economy emerge. And this is where people weren't necessarily after the product or the service. They were after an experience. They went to the Rainforest Cafe, the Hard Rock Cafe. Remember, yep. All of those things. They went to Disneyland and Disney World. Of course, we've been doing that since the 50s, but that was an experience. You go to the Grand Canyon, you take a road trip.
Disney was just ahead of the game there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he was way ahead of game. We Taylor Swift concerts, right? Bruce Springsteen, whatever.
Experiences
moments, that are memorable, that produce happiness, and you look back fondly, maybe photographs, those types of things. Well, now, Scott, I think we're pivoting into the transformation economy. And this is fascinating to me because we're not just talking about a business model change here. We're talking about a new economic offering.
I got a question. So
Sure.
Are we moving from one thing to the other in this transformation because we don't like where we're at? Are we transforming it because we are not satisfied with where we are and we need to transform? Is that the buyer's experience in this transformation?
That's a really interesting question that I'm not sure I have a great answer, other than this is just humans seeking progression, seeking growth, seeking better opportunity. We're certainly a richer, much wealthier economy than we were back when we just extracted commodities in the agricultural economy. So we can afford more things. We spend much less on food than we used to, even with today's inflation and all of that. We're spending peanuts compared to what a family used to spend, say, 150, 200 years ago on food. It consumed most of your budget. Today, I think it's below 10%. And we're just wealthier.
Not if you're getting healthy food.
Well,
if you're getting healthy food, it's going to cost more.
Right. Well, I guess you have to take out, eating out and things like that. But you get the point. We're much wealthier than we used to be. So economic offerings are all about what the customer values. If you take a look at this picture with me, this slide, this is the progression of economic value. And it was posited by Joe Pine and James Gilmore in their book, The Experience Economy, published in 1999 by Harvard Business Review. When I first saw this, and I first saw this in 1997, this diagram blew my mind. Absolutely. I mean, we're talking 28 years ago now. So let me try and explain it. On the one axis, you have a competitive position. Are you differentiated or are you undifferentiated? So this would be, think of this as the degree of commoditization. And on the horizontal axis, you've got pricing. In other words, pricing power. If we're in a commoditized market, the agricultural economy, where Farmer John and Farmer Smith are growing wheat or corn or whatever, walnuts, it's very hard to differentiate those. Now we have all sorts of things like organic and things like that give the farmers a little bit more pricing power. But by and large, if you're pulling stuff out of the ground, it's a commodity. Mm-hmm. And the question that Joe and James asked themselves at each level that you're seeing here, as you move up the progression of economic value, the question they asked at each level is, how do you decommoditize a commodity? Well, if I take a couple different commodities and put them together, like say flour, wheat, other things, I can make bread. And if I make bread, that's now a good, that can give me more pricing power, right? Because I've taken various commodities, I've gone through some type of process, manufacturing or otherwise, put them together and made bread. So now we're making goods, and we mass produce them at the beginning, like the Model T, right? Any color you want, except, as long as it's black type of thing. And then we got better at our manufacturing, and now we can customize things, right? You can have storybooks written for your children with their name in it, right?
Yep.
All of those types of things. So that was just the progression of how we made goods. But what happens when your good becomes a commodity? How do you decommoditize a product? Well, Pine and Gilmore said, well, if you can wrap services around it, you can get more pricing power. You move up the progression of economic value. So if you think about any product that comes with some services, like think about a car, you've got warranties, you've got the dealership service, all of that. You can think about, I always think about General Electric. They make airline engines for airplanes, and they have this program called Power by the Hour, probably the only place where hourly charging makes sense.
You will talk about hourly.
Yeah, absolutely. Because what they do, they tell the airlines, look, you're only going to pay for this engine based on the number of hours it's in the air. And it's our job as General Electric to keep it in the air. So in other words, we're going to monitor it with the Internet of Things now. This is so much easier. They can see hairline fractures and things like that, and they can do preventative maintenance so the plane doesn't get caught up on the ground because the airline makes no money. So now they have a perfect alignment with their interest. But the point is that you're wrapping a service, maintenance, preventative maintenance around a product. And now that gives you more pricing power. And that's what services do. They help us decommoditize the products because we can wrap a service around it. Does that make sense?
I would love to hear how we tie this in.
Okay.
It does make sense so far, up until this point.
Okay, because stick with me here, because I want to see if you pick up on this. You're a bright guy. You're going to pick up on this. Then the question becomes, how do you decommoditize a service? What happens when your service becomes commoditized? And Pine and Gilmore, and hence this is why the book came out in the 90s, said, well, if you can wrap an experience around your services, then you can move up the progression of economic value and get more pricing power. So think about Disney, right? Walt Disney World. It's one big staged experience, quite memorable. And sure, they sell products and services in addition to the experience, but the theme is the experience, right? They're staging an experience for the customer, just like Taylor Swift, just like Bruce Springsteen. And the experience economy is what we've been in since roughly the 90s. We hear this about millennials, right? Millennials don't care about owning things. They want experiences. You've heard that. I've heard that. Everybody talks about. I don't think it's true, by the way. I think millennials want cars and houses, but they may pay a lot more attention to experiences for sure, right? Whether it's customized travel or medical tourism, where you get cosmetic surgery in different countries or whatever, go away after you recover from cancer and recuperate, things like that. So experiences have been with us for a long time. But then what happens when your experience becomes a commodity? And you know this when people say, well, been there, done that, right? Been there, done that. Don't need to see Taylor Swift for the 6th time or Bruce Springsteen again or whoever it might be, right? Then, and this is all in 1997 as I'm reading this, then they said, well, if you want to decommoditize an experience, then guide a transformation for your customer. Bring them from where they are to where they could be. Everybody, every human on the planet has aspirations. And those aspirations fall under being healthier, wealthier, and wiser. And I would also add, live with purpose and meaning, right? So those 4 categories, the question is, can we help people become healthier, wealthier, and wiser and live with purpose? Is that something in the wheelhouse of professionals or indeed any business?
It's a desired future state?
It's a
We're helping
desired
them
future
get
state.
to a future state. We're helping them get there, right?
Exactly. Now, so let me give you so I'm going to back up and we're going to go all the way back down the curve and I'm going to give you a tangible example of this.
A product that's wrapped in a service, that's wrapped in experience, that is wrapped in a transformation.
Right.
Is that
But
the sandwich that we're eating, or the wrap that we have here?
yes, it'd be great if you could do a wrap around this. I'd love that because this is such an important point. I'm going to take you back to the 1900s. And your parents or your mom, most likely your mom back then, is baking you a birthday cake. Now, she's either going to go out to the farm and or maybe the grocery store or the local seller and buy all the ingredients. Either way, she's going to have all the commodities there to bake you a cake, right? And that's the agricultural economy. Then we go into the mass-produced products. So if we slide up to the late 20s, 30s, I think it really started to hit big time, was the whole Betty Crocker, Duncan Hines cake mix. Now mom goes to the store, buys the cake mix, maybe cracks an egg in it, but that's it. And you get a Duncan Hines cake for your birthday. What happens in the 60s and 50s? Well, mom or dad went down to the bakery and bought you a sheet cake and maybe had it customized, had your name written on it, and frosting, that type of thing. What happens in the 80s, Scott?
You're having
Kids-
birthday parties at like restaurants or at
Beautiful.
different places?
Yes, Chuck E. Cheese.
Chuck E. Cheese's.
And
yeah.
what does Chuck E. Cheese tell you? Have your birthday party with us, with the 50 kids, and we'll give you the cake.
We'll give you the cake. Cake's free.
Notice what's happening here as you move up this progression of economic value. The prior tier is being subsumed in the new offering. Duncan Hines is subsuming the commodities, except perhaps the egg, right? And the services are subsuming the products.
It's all getting rolled up. I'm not
It's
going to say
all getting
wrapped
rolled
up.
up.
I'm not going to say wrapped up. It's all
Okay.
getting rolled up into the next thing. And the thing that you're selling is something different each time.
Right. And you're no longer monetizing the prior offerings. You're monetizing the new offering.
People still want the cake.
They
you
want
still
the
gotta
cake.
have the cake.
But it's a service now from the bakery, and they've taken care of all the goods, including the egg, and including all the commodities, right? And you're paying for the baker's expertise and artistry and all of that through the service. And when I first saw this in 97, I said, well, accountants are at the service level. We still call ourselves professional service firms, even though we're not.
We still do now.
Yeah,
after
it's a
that.
crazy term because I think we're more professional knowledge firms, but
Well, it goes back to when I asked you if we were service. When you were talking
Right.
about service workers are not knowledge workers. That was your distinction.
right. And even knowledge, the knowledge economy, that we say on our show all the time, it's in our subtitle to the Soul of Enterprise. It's really not a knowledge economy because, again, economic eras, like you see here, are labeled by their offerings, their output. Knowledge really isn't an output, it's an input, right?
I love how AI rolls up into this too.
Oh,
As we
it's amazing what AI does
how
to
that-
this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How that takes the product itself and buries that into everything else.
But can you
Product
see,
itself was the knowledge, and that's got the knowledge.
when we get to the Chuck E. Cheese level, we're at the experience level, and they've subsumed the service and the good and the commodities, and they're staging an experience for you with their games and their, the mouse and all of that. That's an experience.
Cake's still got to be there, but the cake becomes part of like an afterthought. Like it's taken for granted at that point.
It's all one price.
Yeah.
Everything's one price. And now this is really cool. I'm going to give you a completely, well, not a completely different example, but another example with food. There's these grocery stores. I've never been to one. There's one in San Jose that I'm dying to go to. It's called Eataly, Eatly,
yeah.
Eataly. And it's Italian. It's an Italian market. And the fascinating thing to me about this market is they cover this entire progression of economic value. They will sell
inside.
you authentic Italian ingredients. I mean, they have everything. You name it, they have it. If you've ever been to like an Italian deli, it's that on steroids. It's multiple levels. The place is pretty big. And then, so they'll also sell you goods because they're a grocery store. But they'll also deliver services. They have deli counters that can make sandwiches for you. They have restaurants at different price points within. They have coffee bars, obviously, Italian-inspired espresso bars, things like that. But they also stage experiences in their restaurant because, you know, they have higher-end ones with tablecloths and they have lower-end ones. But then they also guide transformations because they offer cooking classes.
Oh.
How to make pasta, wine aficionado. They cover this entire progression of economic value in one offering, in one location. And if you think about it, professionals, when I first saw this, I was like, oh my God, professionals are poised to guide transformations. That's what we do. We do it every day. We just don't talk about it. We're like fish in water. We don't know we're wet. We help our customers get their kids into college, at least financially. We help them grow their business, have their business be more profitable. We help them, with their cash flow issues. We help them sell their business at a higher price by making it more valuable. We help them build their wealth. We help them build their dream home or their second home. We help plan their legacy for after they're gone with estate and tax planning. We do all of these things.
The desired future state.
Exactly. We do all of these things, and yet, what do we focus on when it comes to talking price and economic offering? Where are we focused? On the services.
We're still focused on the products, the tax return.
Yes, you could make that argument, absolutely. And yet, we are so much more than our scope of work. So much more. We don't use this language. We don't talk about it this way. We don't market it this way. We don't communicate it this way. And I think this move into the transformation economy, this is where we're headed. We're starting to see this everywhere. I think we've talked before on this show, I'm pretty sure.
Absolutely.
One of my favorite examples is Fender. Fender makes guitars.
Guitar, yeah.
And we talked about Fender Play. Because the CEO was interviewed and he was asked, what's the difficult thing about selling guitars? And he said, it's a real problem because people buy a guitar, they're all excited. They probably have lessons lined up. And he says after 6 months, 95% of them quit and the guitar goes under the bed.
We didn't talk about this on the show. Yeah.
It's worth repeating because I've got some updated numbers on this. I know you're a numbers guy. You like numbers, so I'll give you some numbers about this. So he said, and worse yet, they're going to take that guitar out from under the bed and gift it to their cousin, and I'm going to be out another sale. So in 2017, the CEO of Fender launches Fender Play. And Fender Play is a subscription digital library of guitar lessons from any level that you aspire to play, right? So beginner, intermediate, advanced, probably even beyond advanced, to rock star or whatever. And by 2020, before COVID strikes, he has 200,000 subscribers paying roughly $150 a year. COVID strikes, and we're all locked down. We're all learning, new languages and how to bake bread and other things. And he comes out and he says, we'll give you I think it was a 3-month or 6-month trial of Fender Play for free. And he had 1 million people sign up in 2 weeks. It crashed his servers. And as of 2024, the latest year I could find numbers, he's got 930,000 subscribers at $150 a year with a 5% churn rate. And he's got a hybrid model. He's still selling the guitars as separate SKUs. I wish he would kind of wrap the whole thing into a subscription, but they haven't done that. No. But he has sold more guitars in his history in 2020, 21, 22, 23, and 24 than they ever had.
You're selling a transformation there. You're selling the transformation too, because you're teaching people how to play guitar.
You're not selling guitars. You're selling musicianship.
I just got my kids a drum set, and it's an electric Simmons drum kit, and it came with the app to teach them how to play drums too.
Yep.
And the app's free unless you want the paid version to play actual rock songs or other things to play along with. Like they give you the free option just to keep you on the kit so you don't give it up after a few months. Just like the guitars. That's crazy.
Isn't it wild? And there are literally now hundreds of examples of companies of all sizes, all the way up to Nike, the Mayo Clinic, offering transformations where the experience, the service, the goods are all subsumed into the transformation.
So the guitar shops used to just have people that gave lessons at the shop. You know, you buy the guitar, but then you come back or somebody comes out and does the lessons. Now you've got that built into the product is the service of the lessons itself.
Yep.
That they can take anywhere because it's an app, right?
And that's part of the experience, which is, again, part of the transformation, basically. Everything.
The transformation is the person who wants to learn how to play guitar, that wants to become the rock star.
That's right. That's right. And by the way, the other interesting thing about transformations, as opposed to all these other stages, is if I'm trying to sell you a product or a service, or even to some extent experience, I got to gin up demand for that. I've got to reach you somehow, TV, newspaper ad, online, whatever it might be. I've got to reach you and try and get you to go, wow, that looks cool. Let's go do that this weekend. With transformations, since they're universally desired, you don't have to gin up market demand for them. The demand already exists. What we have to do as professionals is discover what those aspirations are.
You have to tap into that.
Yep. And we do that through conversations and relationships.
And that's already there.
And it's
so
already
you have
there.
to dig something up that's underneath the surface because they don't know that that's what they want.
Yep.
When they're coming to you, and let's just say this is a client, sometimes they don't know what that desired future state, where they want to be, and you got to ask the right questions to get them there.
Yep. We're going to help them prevent something, maybe through risk mitigation, or accept something, or enjoy something, or improve something, their business, their profitability, their cash flow. All of these transformations can be done not only at the individual level and maybe at the family level, but also at the business level. And so I think a great example of this is Profit First. Or I think, didn't she just have MacKenzie on?
Nikole. Yep.
Nikole. And she was talking about, she's got a new profit plan.
She says Profit First on steroids, but yes.
Okay, Profit First on steroids. Okay, excellent. I love it.
But it's a transformation.
It's a transformation. That's exactly right. And here's my question. Okay, you put them through Profit First or Profit First on steroids, then what? See, I think professionals can do serial transformations with their customers because there's always something to work on, either in their personal or business life. There's always something that we can be doing for them. Now, we can't do a lot at one time because the customer has to want these transformations. That's the other thing. We really have no control over when they buy or how committed to the process they're going to be. Just kind of like if you go to a personal trainer, if you're not following their advice, they're going to fire you. Otherwise, you're going to be a walking billboard for their ineptitude, right? Yeah. It's the last thing they want. They want you to change. They're motivated to see you change, but you still have to do it, and you have to make sure you sustain it through time. So that's got to be part of the transformation too. We can't let them fall off the wagon. If we're moving them from alcoholic to sober, we can't let them retreat. From smoker to non-smoker, you can't let them fall back into their old ways. You've got to sustain that transformation through time. Who better to do that than professionals? Starbucks can't do it. Starbucks can give me a great experience. They can build Starbucks reserves, right, which are really cool. The only way Starbucks can transform me is if they teach me how to really appreciate coffee at a higher level, which I'm sure they do or they could do. That wouldn't be a significant transformation, but it would be a transformation, but not like the stuff accounting professionals can do for their customers.
The transformation you can get is for them to get you to stop drinking coffee. That's big transformation that'll never happen.
Right.
Yeah.
They're not going to do that. I mean, I put together this 2x2. You can see that there are different transformation types, and Everybody gets caught up with this word because they think, oh, a transformation is something big. It's like getting married. It's like having children. Yes, those are huge transformations, right? Because they change who you are going forward. The example that philosophers love to talk about is going from a human being to a vampire. Would you make that decision? Vampires never die. It's a great life. If you talk to vampires, they say, oh, it's great. But you wouldn't know until you made that change, right? Just like you wouldn't know what it's like to have kids until you have kids, or get married until you get married. That's why they call these things wild problems, because they're just, you don't know until you dive in. But look at all the other things that we can do for our customers. There's all sorts of ways that we accountants transform our customers, and yet we don't use this language. And I think this language is going to begin to be used a lot more by all different companies, because that's going to be the new offering. The products and the services are going to be subsumed into the transformation offering, whatever that might be. And let me just, to make this even more tangible, let me give you some examples of kind of like what Nikole has done with her profit program.
Profit points.
We could have wealth building journeys. We could have business value optimization. We could have financial wellness programs, cash flow transformation. We could help our customers with digital transformation for their customers, risk management, sustainability, innovation, predictive financial modeling, real-time financial intelligence, analytics. These are all in their own way transformations. And we don't use this language. We talk about the service, the effort, the number of hours, the number of transactions. How many transactions do you have? How many employees do you have?
Well, it's where we're all comfortable. That's where most accountants are comfortable with, because that's where they know that they can hang their price onto, or
Yes.
whichever levers are being pulled. And actuality, that's still what Nikole, that's how she's pricing a lot of things too. I can't speak on it exactly, but I know she's using GoProposal, and she's still tracking like how many things that they're doing to determine the price. That's usually
Right.
what we do. We're both agreeing that this is a widespread problem because we're not using the right language, so we can't value our services at the level that they should be. It's hard for us to capture that value, or for the customer to perceive that value.
Exactly. What's happening, whether we like it or not, because this is just the progression of value economic history, these things are getting commoditized. And you're certainly seeing that when you brought up AI. You're certainly going to see that with tax return prep and other types of offerings that can be commoditized. Now, I'm not saying that compliance work is going to disappear. No, what I'm saying is it's going to be subsumed into this new offering of guiding transformations, just like
You've
Chuck
always
E.
been
Cheese.
saying this.
Yes, I have
You've
been.
been pretty consistent with this, because you've been saying we need to move up the value chain. And
Absolutely.
value pricing was the start of all of this, and this is just better articulated.
Here's one difference, though, and even I didn't understand this very well, didn't have the vocabulary. This is a new economic offering. It's not just a business model change like moving from hourly billing to value pricing or even subscription pricing. Those were business model change. This is a new economic era, and economic eras don't care about your feelings. They don't care about your hesitancy or resistance to change. They just bowl over you. One day your customers are buying horse and buggies, and the next day they're buying automobiles, right?
So in this current day that we're talking about, let's get an example in our industry of somebody that's already in a place to be offering this new economic offering. Is it Intuit for their customers, because they're starting to offer a service with their product and their experience? And then once they have all of their products together working as one, the customer comes in and they have an experience because they're working with all of the same. I'm just asking if they're the ones who are going to be the most ready to take advantage of this new economy.
It's really, I just heard Joe Pine interviewed on this very thing, and they weren't talking about Intuit, but they were talking about Apple. And his take on this is going to be very, very difficult for big companies to shift their mindset around offering transformations, even though I can give you many examples of companies that are doing it, like the Mayo Clinic, like Nike, like Audi. Even our automobiles are becoming transformations. They're guiding us to a better future. They're making us feel better as we travel. with lighting and music and even smells. They can drive you to the ER if you have a medical event, assuming we get autonomous driving. These are all more than just products and experiences and goods. These are transformations. I have a house that is built for me that makes me feel better, that keeps me healthier, the air. These are the ways that companies are beginning to think. And I think Intuit is pretty far advanced. They could start to do this.
I think they already are. When they're saying ditch your tax preparer or ditch this person, we can do this. We can do your books. We can do your taxes. We can have everything under this one roof and give you this one experience of a transformation for your personal and business finances. Let's just say.
Yeah, but are they doing that on a consistent basis? Are they doing it from womb to tomb?
I don't think they're actually practicing it. I think they're in a position that they're putting themselves in a position to be able to do that.
I don't know if that's part of their long-term thinking. I think Joe Pine has actually worked with Intuit, so it wouldn't surprise me if they've seen this and they're aware of it. But I think it'd be much easier for like a firm your size to do it than it would be for an Intuit to do it, because we have closer relationships.
Well, that was the next phase of this discussion, is how is it relevant to some of us, right? Like that are running firms right now that feel like we're stuck somewhere in the middle of this.
Right.
Because of how we've always done things, how we're pricing, and how we're creating the experience now, we're dating ourselves too, or we're holding ourselves back.
I think so. And I think the best way to shift to a firm that guides transformations as opposed to one that just delivers experiences is to create a new offering and create a new firm with that new offering. A new firm.
So is that a different firm from the Angus Barn or the Ruth's Chris Steakhouse across the street from the McDonald's? Do you need to make a new firm that's not even selling steaks?
Yep. I think so. I mean, you could still sell steaks, but it would just be at a different level.
You got to sell the farm experience. Actually,
Yes.
Bring somebody to the farm and let them kill their own meat.
Well, it's funny you say that. That's one of Joe Pine's really ironic examples about the move up, this progression of value, because when we started to get into the experience economy, what were some farms doing? They were saying, come and churn butter, come and bale hay, come and milk the cows. My dad looked at I have a farm right up the street who used to do that. And my dad looked at that and said, I used to hate doing all that as a kid. Those were my chores. Why would I go pay 50?
To do it. Yeah.
Now we're paying to have our kids experience it. You see this during Halloween, right? The pumpkin patch, and they take you out on the back of the truck to go pick your pumpkin, and they might have a cow in a barn, and it's like, that's crazy, but that's how economic progression happens.
So what's our eye on? What kind of transformation or experience? Have we even gotten to the experience yet for us? Because I think we're still wrapping services up in products.
Let me ask you, do you think accounting firms stage a good experience?
I think we've talked about it a lot. I think James Ashford tries to bring that up in his whole presentation and salesmanship of the way he brought up GoProposal and creating an experience for people, letting them know you're waiting for them when they walk in the door, and having a cup of coffee brewed or their favorite drink waiting for them. Lead them into the conference room and have their name on the wall and stuff, and like do things to make them feel like this is a Disney experience.
Right.
So I always think of James Ashford and others that are trying to bring the salesmanship back into what we're doing and actually sell ourselves, create an experience for the client. That's the relationship, right? Selling the relationship and building on that is the experience beyond the service or the product. Transformations, I think we've been talking about this a lot. We've been talking about getting customers to a desired future state and selling outcomes. That's part of the whole, like, going back to your value pricing and selling or talking about outcomes, right? Figuring out what that transformation is before they can tell you, I think that's also part of the next step too.
Right. I think as you start to offer these, since we're pattern seeking, humans that look for patterns, our brains are really good at that. You'll start to see what offerings really resonate with your type of customers. Could be the wealth building journey. It could be the business value optimization. By the way, you don't have to do everything. You can just specialize in certain transformations. So I think we're going to start to see different niches around the type of transformation that you offer. If you're just going to be really narrow and offer one type of thing, I think that could be incredibly viable as well. Since we're professionals, we can help with multiple transformations, I think.
Sure. But I like how you brought in like the wealth management or any type, because like you said, we're already dealing with customers year after year. Our clients are, they a lot of times, as long as your firm's around, they're lifetime clients, and you're working with them through different stages of their life. So marking those milestones as part of the relationship and having those mile markers or the milestones, as we've discussed previously on this show, having that be part of the guide posts for your transformation setting. Like, one thing I asked Nikole about is, how do you continue this transformation with the client when you discuss it in the beginning? How do you keep that eye on that? Maybe it's the North Star, or maybe it's a desired state that they know they will get to, but how do you keep that as part of the tip of the conversation when then you're just back in the background doing a lot of the work again?
Right. Because I think these transformations can happen serially, meaning we can go from one to another and keep moving them to whatever their desired future state is. Okay, now that we've got your cash flow transformation settled, now what else do you want to work on? Do you want to work on growing the business or buying equipment or whatever it might be? But I just think we need the language of transformations and stop focusing on the efforts and the products and the services. Because if you were a Martian that came down and looked at an engagement letter between a firm and a customer and asked the question, what are they buying? The Martian would say, well, they're buying either ours or they're buying a bundle of outputs, services. We're going to do these things. And by the way, if something else happens, then we have to go to the Department of Paperwork and get a change order and a new price. I think all that goes away and we create a better experience for the customer. It's not a great experience to send the customer a 400-page tax organizer. That's a lousy experience. We should stop doing that as a profession.
Yes, we should. Yes, I agree with you there. And I think we're on our way. We're at least getting there. There's products that are going to help with that. What would you say to let's say you've sold this transformation and then the customer takes you for granted after they're in that new future state, and they maybe don't feel like they need this anymore, right? So you've helped them get through this. You've fixed their cash flow issues. They're in a better future state now. Still doing the compliance, but maybe they don't appreciate all of that anymore. They're in that new future state and they take it for granted. Is this just part of doing business? How do you keep yourself relevant?
I don't see that as a big risk because we always have the power to let go of a customer, right? If it's no longer a good fit. This is why I like what my colleague in the UK does. He puts every customer relationship at risk at the beginning of every new year. Should we continue this relationship? Mm-hmm. Because sometimes he wants out of it. Maybe you can no longer guide them to the desired future because you don't have the expertise. You're a GP and you can't perform cardiac surgery, for instance, so you find them a specialist who could do that. But I think we have as much say about that as the customer does in some respects.
Yeah,
I mean, a customer can always fire us, right?
Sure. I guess it depends on and I don't have a specific example. I'm just thinking in terms of once you get them to the desired future state, is the engagement over? If you're selling a transformation and you get them there and it's transformed, do you have to sell a new transformation for this to be transformational, or is it now an experience again?
No, you have to discover a new transformation.
There's
through
always
some
places to improve.
Absolutely. There's always something that everybody desires. There was a show on TV
back
about
into discovery.
Yes, back the show about plastic surgeons. I forget what it's called, Rip and Tuck or something like that. And the people would walk into these plastic surgeons, and it was two guys, the doctors, and their one question, Nip Tuck. Their one question was, "So Scotty, tell me what you don't like about your body." Now you ask anybody that, and they're going to give you all sorts of aspirations. Well, you can probably only do one or two things at a time, right?
Yep.
So, and that's my question for firms. Okay, you put them on profit first. You got that squared away. What's next? Where do you go now? you go to some other aspiration, either in their personal or business life.
So you help them get to the new normal.
And you
then
keep them
gotta
there.
figure-
And you
gotta
keep them there.
Yes, you have to maintain that new plateau,
Yep.
then get them to the next mountain, climb the second
Yep.
mountain and the third.
Yep. And our clients are videos, right? They're not pictures. So they're constantly evolving and they're constantly have new dreams and new aspirations. All we have to do is really have deep conversations to uncover those aspirations. And even if we can't do the guiding of the because all you can do is guide a transformation. You can't create it. The customer has to want it, for starters. They have to have skin in the game big time because it's going to change them. But we can guide them. And if we can't guide them, let's find them a pro who can in our social network.
Yeah, in our sphere of influence.
Yep.
So position ourselves as the expert and continue to niche down. None of the messaging is changing here. You're just better articulating where we're taking the client, right? None of the prior messages and the times that we've been on and the things we've discussed become irrelevant with this. It becomes more relevant, all of that. And this is a way to help frame our next phase in this evolution.
Our new offering.
Yeah.
It's a new, well, we can quibble about that. It's not really new. We've been doing it, but that's not what we've been charging for. We've been charging for the outputs, right? The scope of work. Now we're really moving to outcomes, but I prefer to call it transformations.
Yeah. But it's the outcomes, though, not the outputs. It's
That's
not
right.
the things that we're doing. It's the feelings that we're bringing forward. It's the future state. It's that feeling of a better future, a transformation.
Yep. My favorite example, because it's so simple and people can relate to it, is Joe Pine himself. He's a pretty good golfer. He was like a 14 handicap or something at the time. And he goes to this.
Does he play at Pinehurst?
No, because I think he's in Minnesota. But anyway, he went to a golf pro and he said, "I want to be a single digit handicapper." And the golf pro says, "Oh, okay. Well, my lessons are $150 a half hour or whatever." And he says, "No, you don't understand. I want you to bring me to a single digit handicap, and I'll give you 10 grand when I get there." And of course, now the pro has to size him up, has to watch his swing, see if he's got the natural ability and all of that, see if he can work with this guy and how committed is he to it. But let me ask you, Scott, and he did find a pro to agree with this, by the way, does that change the relationship between those two?
Fundamentally, it just changes the billing. We don't like to talk about billing, but it changes the way that the invoice is written out.
But the thing is, the guy was no longer incentive now to sell half-hour lessons. He was incentive to get Joe to that single digit as quickly as he could, which means he's pounding on his door, calling him at 7 a.m. in the morning, "Get your butt out of bed. We're going to go play 18." Yeah. He actually went out and played with him so he could, get in all the trouble you get into that when you're on the driving range, you don't get into. And he did get to single digit. Now, once he gets to an 8, can the pro help him get to a 4? I don't know. It may require a different pro. But the point
it
is,
did change the nature of the relationship.
It does, absolutely.
It changes the motivators.
It's not just a billing thing. And I'm not arguing to price like that, a contingency. That's not the point. The point is when you're focused on the transformation, the services are means to an end.
Yes.
It's the end that we both have in mind, because that's what it means to be a professional. We're paid for an outcome, not performing a task. And we've turned everything into a task in this profession. We need a new manifesto for this profession. We really do. Because it's crazy what we're continuing to do, charging for services and scope of work and all of these things when we should be focused on the transformation.
Are you proposing that all of the knowledge economy do this, or is it just those that are specialized?
Well, I do think professionals are poised to do this the fastest. So take concierge doctors and direct primary care doctors. We talked a lot about them in past episodes. They're already doing this. How? Because when you sign up for a DPC, direct primary care doctor, or a concierge doctor, they're not just interested in curing you when you get sick. They're interested in keeping you healthy. That's the transformation.
The medical system is the most prime for this type of transformation and this change. And so, as you said, there are doctors out there that are aligned with the patients. But most doctors, their alignment is with pharmaceutical companies or those
Insurance
those
companies.
that are insurance companies.
Yep.
Both those that are making money on your sickness.
Yes. And they're overworked, by the way. They have to, the average GP.
But that's what the system was perverted and turned into. It wasn't that it started out that way.
No,
I'm
not at all.
sure nobody started out saying we're going to keep you sick and that's how we're going to make our money. It's just what it turned into. And that is what you are suggesting that our economics have turned into on the side of knowledge workers. A lot of knowledge workers have turned this into, we're going to make our most money on your compliance woes.
Or just transactions.
Transactional,
It's it's a transactional relationship. And in the old days, the doctor-patient relationship was sacred. I mean, they came to your house, they knew your kids, the family doctor, right, that you see on Marcus Welby and the Waltons and all of that. That's gone. I mean, it's doctors are interesting because it's the only profession in the United States of America that is not allowed to set its own pricing. They have 10,000 billing codes and growing every day for various tasks that they perform. That's crazy. And that, by the way, is set by the government, Medicare, and then the insurance companies piggyback on those same codes. And they're the only profession that can't set their own price unless they go DPC or concierge. And that's why more and more of them are doing it.
Bypassing insurance altogether with
Altogether. Yep.
Direct primary care and concierge doctors are the outliers in this system.
Yep, and they're the wave of the future, I think. They're changing the way healthcare is delivered.
They are the wave of the future, but they're in an economy that is not going to allow that future to happen. And I think that's what tax preparers and a lot of tax practitioners deal with as well. Like, we're in a system that it's hard to change from within. The system's either going to break and completely fail, and then that's where they're going to thrive, or they're just going to always be the outliers.
And I'm not at all suggesting that every firm can do this. I think it's going to go through the same evolution as we did with hourly billing to value pricing to subscription. I think you're going to have that 2.5% of firms, those firms that listen to Accounting High, early adopt and do this first. And they start talking about it. They put that offering out there. The consumers flock to it because it's a better, superior offering, more in line with what they're really buying, which is the transformation, not the service, not the tax return. And I think over time, you're either on this bus or on this train or under it, because this is an economic era we're moving into. It's bigger than a business model. It doesn't care about your feelings. This is already here. It's only going to grow. And
well, I like to say that about Intuit too. Intuit doesn't care about your feelings. Us tax preparers or anybody like that, they're going to keep doing what they do. And I do think they're in a position to take advantage of this next phase. And I think you're rightfully so. You think that us accountants, I think we can put ourselves in the position of the DPS or the direct primary DPC and the concierge doctors.
Yep.
That's us right there.
It is.
Intuit is in a position where stay within the system that we're in too, because they're working within it.
And remember that Intuit's trying to do this at scale, which is also a problem because you can't have these transformative impacts with customers if you have 1,000 customers.
What are your thoughts on Bench? That's an example of what somebody tried to do on scale with service.
Bench is a great example of not thinking in systems, because Bench engineers and computer people probably looked at bookkeeping tasks and said, oh, look at all this. We can automate this. And they completely remove the human element from it and all the other things that go into that offering that bookkeepers have, talking to the customer, guiding them through difficult times, finding them other providers that they need when they need it. All that can't be automated. It really can't.
They were back on the product side of it, and they productized it even more and commoditized it even more and proved that that's not the direction that we should be going.
It's not we need more high touch. High tech is great, but the more high tech, the more high touch you need. And that's going to require the human element. And that's why I keep coming back to this idea of a Dunbar number. every accountant can only have every human can only have like 75 relationships, meaningful relationships. I mean, the type of relationships where if they call you, you're going to take the call, right? And we're just not processed to be able to handle 500-600 customers. I mean, it's crazy. Plus, I think we're betraying ourselves because we're not having the impact on their lives that we could be if we were serving fewer number of customers. Which
So
is
how many
why
meaningful relationships was that you said?
I think it's the Dunbar number. I think is somewhere between 75 and 150, which is just the maximum that you can have and really know the people.
Sure.
And I'm not even sure it's that high for an accountant. It might be 30.
Well,
I
and
think
that's where you go back into the concierge or some of these concierge type models for firms where they have 26 clients and they treat them all very well and they have very focused offering. Those are the people that it can be selling. They're most poised to be selling transformations. And
Bench was trying to take that 26 into 26,000. And I'm sorry,
opposite direction.
You're just becoming a sweatshop. That's not why people entered this profession. We entered this profession to help people, and transformation is the highest point of value you can get to. There's nothing beyond that. I asked Joe Pine, what's beyond transformations now that you've had 28 years to think about that? He said, nothing, Ron. He said, what's beyond transformations happens at the pearly gates or wherever your beliefs take you after you're gone.
Because in one lifetime, you can have enough transformations. There's always another transformation in your lifetime.
Right. The final one is transcendence, I guess. So, and this is not my theory, Scott. I want to be clear. This is Joe Pine, who, as we speak, is writing a book on the transformation economy. It's due out later this year from Harvard Press, and I think it's going to be a corker. This guy he's seen this since 1997. It blows my mind how far ahead he was with this transformation idea. When he first wrote about it, he had very few examples. He pointed to the difference between somebody in the gym that helped you work out versus a personal weight trainer. That's the only, I think, one of the 2 examples that he had in the first book. Now, there's a million examples. And I've got another book here that I just finished reading, and we interviewed the author, Trends in the Transformation Economy, by this guy named Christophe Jacquet, French guy. He's got hundreds of examples in his book. In tourism, automotive, medical, the categories were unbelievable. And now that I know about it and it's on my radar, it's kind of like, when you buy a red Volkswagen, you see them everywhere.
You see them all over,
right? I'm seeing transformations I'm starting to see this message seep through.
You're seeing the patterns.
Yeah. But you've got to be aware of it. And once you're aware of it, you can never go back because you realize every economic offering it subsumes the prior offering, just like the Chuck E. Cheese example.
It subsumes that the other ones still do exist, but they become they're fewer of them,
and they're a means to an end. They're a means to an end.
Right. People are still having birthday parties. They're still buying their cakes too, or they're still making them at home. All those things are still. People are still eating cake all across the board.
Yep. But
so what's our cake? The tax return.
Wow, the tax return. This does something else I think that's really cool too on that score. I mean, there's a lot of talk now about, we should charge based on the ROI of the tax savings. And look, I'm all for tax savings. We need to do everything within our power to help our customers keep as much money as they legally can. All for it. Tax avoidance is fantastic, and accountants are great at it. EAs are probably better at it. You'll never hear a CPA say that, but I'll say it. You just did a show with some EAs, and I'm telling you, EAs get no respect. Yes, they do. The smart CPAs respect an EA because I'll tell you, the EA exam is 1,000 times more difficult than the CPA exam on tax.
It's more relevant. Let's not say it's more difficult, but it's one tax section for the CPAs. The EAs have 3.
Right.
We have 3 section tests for the same thing.
I've always admired EAs for that. But I just don't want to save my customer taxes. I want to maximize their wealth.
Right.
And so I want to help them.
That, but that's what the experience is doing, right? The transformation and the experience is taking it beyond the tax return, but you're still bundling it in. You're still giving the cake.
You still got the cake in there.
The serving the cake.
And if
It's
you
not a
do
separate line item on the invoice. At Chuck E.
no,
Cheese.
not at all, not at all. And I also think the subscription model dovetails nicely with transformations because it's a relationship model. And
Well, the subscription is where I was kind of poking holes at the transformation, because once the transformation's over, do you still need the subscription?
you do because
You
you're
need
going
to but you need to reinvest in a new transformation
That's right.
or reinvigorate it.
And you're going to have those conversations because with fewer customers and more touch points with the customer, you're going to learn about other aspirations that they have.
So where's the subscription with the single digit handicap? Once he pays him the 10 grand, the transaction's over and the relationship's over. There's no subscription there.
Yep. The Golf Pro didn't think
Until
that
his
far out.
handicap goes back up to 15 again, and then he's got to.
Yeah, and I don't think he has, by the way, which also impresses the hell out of me about Joe Pine, but because he's maintained that single handicap, and that's a difficult thing to do. I think the subscription economy lends itself, or the offering lends itself.
It dovetails into it.
It does. Because
after the transformation, you could have a subscription that keeps it
sustained through time.
I was looking for that S word. Sustains it.
And start guiding new ones.
Sure.
As well, the serial transformations. Plus, remember, the subscription model doesn't look at the math of the moment. So it's not transactional based. What was our margin on that tax return or that job or that customer? It's portfolio based. And that means that, different customers are going to have different transformations going on. But, the whole portfolio, if we price it right, is going to be much more profitable because it's a higher value offering. To me, the transformation is how to get that 3 or 4 times price. Because if you think about a customer that's seeking out a new EA or CPA or whatever, they come to you or they go to a firm and they hear about, okay, well, we have here's our 3 tiers, here's our price, here's what you get, blah, blah, blah. Okay, great. That's good. That's better than hourly billing. But then they come to you and you start talking to them about wealth building journeys and how you can help their business valuation be optimized, how you can help their cash flow. You start talking to them about transformations, about where they'd like to be, what they aspire to be. Who's going to be more valuable?
They won't compare you to anybody. If nobody else mentioned that to them, you've just put yourself in a whole different bracket. Yep. They are not comparing you to anybody else there. They're comparing you with themselves and where they could be in the future. So now the opportunity of not working with you is a lot greater. The opportunity cost of not working with you, these other people aren't going to get you to that future state. You've talked about this, and even though maybe your bill is 10 grand and the other ones were 2, they're not thinking about that.
Yep. And I also think it's much easier to differentiate yourself at a higher price than a cheaper price.
Of course.
Because now you can white glove them and you can create those great experiences, digital and even face-to-face. We're going to also have to stage some experiences for these transformations. We're going to have to make sure that they get memorabilia for various milestones that they reach along the way and things like that. But we're equipped to do that.
Yeah. How could they afford not to go with you?
Think about what they'd be missing out on if they just went with somebody who did their taxes.
So when you're doing something like this and you're that focused, you're already going to be differentiated in all aspects of it because it's so unique to that one service offering or how you have evolved at your firm or when you've got it to. That there's not too many, you can't be comparable. You probably would run into this if you were trying to compare concierge doctors or direct primary care professionals.
Right.
Because there's probably so few of them, and they're probably different geographic areas or they serve different clientele that you can't really compare them. So when you're out in the market, you probably only have a few options. So fewer options makes it easier to make a decision. Typically.
Yeah, in fact,
your prices are very differentiated.
What's wild about DPC docs is there's roughly 2,500 of them across the U.S. and all 50 states. So 2,500 independent practices. And since they max out at 500 to 600 patients, as opposed to 2,400 patients that, a doctor on the fee-for-service treadmill takes, they're running at 25% capacity. But every one of these practices has a waiting list, which is really powerful, by the way, to create a waiting list in your firm.
Do you think they are concerned with scaling their firms that they want to scale and grow them, or are these practitioners just like at capacity and they're not looking to, like, they are the sole caregiver, or they're the doctors. It's not like they have teams of other
Some of
doctors
them do.
too.
Some of them are growing, and they are getting more. They're bringing on more doctors, like the guy we talked to, Dr.
Probably
Paul
seen private
Thomas.
equity go into this too. I would think.
Yeah, private equity is in the insurance medical practices for sure. They're buying up,
yeah.
the surgeon groups and dental groups and things like that. I haven't seen them make a play
Maybe
for
they
DPCs.
won't be in this because it's too
Amazon made a play for DPC. They bought One Medical, and that is the largest DPC practice in the U.S. Now, One Medical is interesting. It's a hybrid. They do take insurance because they take Medicare patients. But I think for normal patients, they don't accept insurance, but they will take Medicare. But Amazon paid $3.4 billion for One Medical. They made a major play in that space. But the independent DPCs, like my dad has in South Carolina, he maxes out at, I think, 550 patients. My dad was on a waiting list for like 6 months to get in. Somebody had to move away or pass away to be able to get in. And the average appointment with these guys is like an hour. Because, again, they're there to keep you healthy, not just to cure you when you're sick.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, wow. That's fascinating. So I think that's the direction that we're also going in.
I hope
There's
so.
a lot of parallels, similarities too. Oh, this is great. Yeah. Care to give our students a preview of our next topic that we're going to be discussing here? The other topic of the discussion.
I will be presenting this at Scaling New Heights.
Fascinating. Okay.
But it's Scott, we talk a lot about burnout in this profession. A lot. And I used to talk about it all the time. In fact, you can read Time's Up and you'll see me citing a study on burnout. Now, it was about doctors, but same principle. I've been reading a lot about burnout
Same
for the last 20
principle at
years.
Accounting High too.
And here's the problem. It's the wrong diagnosis. I don't think we're suffering from burnout in the profession. We're suffering from moral injury, which is we're not living our purpose because we're in a fee-for-service treadmill, and that's not why we joined this profession. When you join a profession and you don the mantle of CPA, EA, bookkeeper, finance professional, whatever, that's not just about what you do. It's about who you are. You're a member of a profession. You're supposed to profess something. And one of the biggest things that separates a professional from other types of workers is we're paid for outcomes, not tasks. But when you're put in a fee-for-service model, we have to track everything in 6-minute increments. That's a moral injury because you're transgressing on deeply held beliefs about why you entered the profession, why you don that mantle. And I think that's the diagnosis that's correct.
Yeah, we're not going to transgress on our transformations today. We're not going to transfer any of that knowledge over, but I love this. We're going to discuss deeply into moral injuries and all the moral injuries that you may have suffered, students. We're here for it. Thank you, Ron. Thank you for giving me another session in the principal's office. I get into trouble a lot. I come in here and he's setting me straight, getting me right.
Just add that Ferris Bueller clip at the beginning, Scott, and I'll be thrilled. Awesome.
Fantastic. Peace out.
Thank
Class
you.
dismissed.